Hello, and welcome to another episode of Stu and the Nunn, an online radio show and podcast focused on national security, policy, politics, and selfless service. We're here to give you an honest opinion, different perspective, and hopefully a few laughs. We do this by not only interviewing guests, but also sharing our own perspectives and asking you, the listener, to interact with us on our chat room, via our Facebook page, and of course, on Twitter. Keep it funky. That's right, everyone. Keep it funky. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Stu and the Nunn. We are back. I feel like I have been AWOL because, well, I've been AWOL. But we are back, and so glad to be with you. You got Stu here in the northern studio, actually in the studio. And as you can see to my left, your right, you can see the Nunn over there in the southern studio. What's up, Toby? How you doing, buddy?
Well, I'm doing good, and you know what AWOL rhymes with, and that's because you haven't been around, and that's how I feel. I've been missing you, my brother, and I'm glad that. I know that was hurtful, right?
Sorry about that. I'm sorry.
I sunk it in the ribs, Brutus style, and gave it a little twist.
Hey, I was on last week from a hospital parking lot. You got to give me some credit.
I got much love. No, we the summertime is always a busy time, and the juggling of professional responsibilities as well as other family obligations and all the different things we have going on. We're going into the busiest probably.
You're good. Keep going. Sorry, yeah. I was trying to set things up, and you came blasting across the speakers. I turned it.
Well, you just like the sound of my melodic voice. Hey, the people aren't tuned in to listen to us tonight. They're actually tuning in because we have an amazing guest. Shout out to our unpaid producer, Rob.
Dude, big props. We got to double his pay. What's
two times? The unpaid producer.
What's two times
that's
zero?
That's actually a professional. That's like an industry term. I don't know if he knows that yet, but we've coined that phrase as an industry term. And Rob's always helping us track down the people we really want to talk to. Tonight's guest, I had the opportunity.
Oh, did I lose you? No, don't tell me you got bad internet. I lost you. You said opportunity and you cut off for a second, buddy.
No, I'm still here.
Okay.
But it didn't work out due to my business travel. So super excited that I'm getting a recock on it and getting to meet him. But let's get him out here because we don't have a ton of time, and we wanted to make sure everything was fired up with the social media, so we're running a few seconds late.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, we want to introduce Mr. Hamady Jason. Hamady is if you've checked out his site, The Terrorist Whisperer, you can see Hamady now. I just brought him up right between Toby and I. I mean, he was born in Iraq. He was an Iraqi, went become an Iraqi soldier, and then turned into probably, as his bio says, probably one of the most lethal weapons we had in the fight in Iraq. Because it's all about intelligence, and when you have someone on the ground providing real time, well, in the military terms called human intelligence, it is worth its weight in gold. And so we are not only glad and thankful for his service and what he's done to help us, the United States of America and all the coalition forces, but we are even more ecstatic and humbled that having you joined us tonight, buddy. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
It's my pleasure and honor to be with you guys.
It is. Well, I'll definitely say it's ours because I mean you are a force to be reckoned with. You were on the battlefield, and you are well respected, and it's evident by checking out your site and looking who's endorsed your book and wrote in it. You are well respected by some of the greatest military leaders and minds of our country, and probably a lot more that aren't up there in the ranks of stars, but probably the ones that you were helping day in and day out. You were shoulder to shoulder with, that probably even would speak your praises even more. So thank you again.
My pleasure.
So
yeah. Go ahead, Toby.
If it's all right, I'd love to jump in here.
It's all you, brother. Go.
And just kind of set a frame of context. There's this great American film involving, some iconic American actors. I believe Redford, maybe Matt Damon. I don't know who all was in it, but talking about the whisperer, the ability to have a special relationship, to understand, to know the secrets of. The name of your book and the name of the upcoming movie that we populated. We got the trailer up here on Facebook. We got the book up here on Facebook. The Terrorist Whisperer. There's this myth that with animals, there's you got Cesar the dog guy or whatever, and there's this myth that this is some special talent. And in your case, this is not a life skill, or sorry, not a career skill. This is a lifelong issue. You were a young boy. You were firsthand subjected to the brutalities of a regime. You've seen firsthand, you've experienced firsthand as a young boy, especially in the formative years. Any boy going through, the prepubescent and pubescent years, those are the most impactful years in really building the core fabric of your character, your belief structure, your understanding, your ideology. And those years were spent as a political prisoner under Saddam, and you had the opportunity to turn around as an adult and use those very, very negative experiences for good. So I kind of want to just set the context, set the stage that, you didn't come upon doing what you did in service of your country, which in essence supported and complemented the service to our country. You did this, for altruistic purposes, and you had the opportunity to be vengeful. You had the opportunity, to be self-serving, but you didn't take that. You took the moral high road, and you did it for the betterment of humanity. So I want to make sure that everyone understands it up front. You really are different. And the word whisperer, while it's fitting, doesn't do you justice. So Hamady, welcome to the show, and talk to us a little bit about your experience. First, a lot of people forget, Saddam wasn't the best guy. People,
correct. Yeah.
People forget, he wasn't the best guy. So if you don't mind, share with the audience just briefly your experience as a young boy and how that set the stage for what we really want to talk about tonight. So our listening audience, our viewing audience, kind of have a frame of context to what made the fabric of who you are.
First of all, I want to thank you both for having me here. It's an honor being with you guys. Many Americans might not be aware about what Iraq used to be, like under Saddam Hussein. Saddam was a dictator. He controlled Iraq for 35 years. We were living under one political party, which was known as the Ba'ath Party. We had only one candidate to vote for, which was Saddam Hussein. Um, it's a very different life comparing it to an American life here in the United States. We were a country that was policed and monitored by intelligence agencies for 35 years. We were afraid to talk about politics in front of our own kids because nobody trusted anyone during that moment. And when you live in a country that way, in a life that is not giving you any kind of freedom, it's not giving you any freedom of speech, you'll have to walk in one line. And that line is requiring you to be quiet and not get in trouble and not try to be in the way of the regime. But at a certain point of your life, you will come to a point where you're between either you're going to defend yourself, whether you're going to just continue to be the slave that they want you to be. I think me as a child that I just wanted a normal life like everybody else. I just wanted to be like everybody else and do what I wanted to do. But I couldn't understand how that life was in Iraq until I was about 12-year-old when I ran into a former police officer who was a member of the regime, and I refused to give him my money, and which was a common thing in Iraq at the time. And he decided to put me in a prison. And we had a saying in Iraq. It says that a pen can kill you before a gun does. And what it means that during Saddam Hussein, people in Iraq were so dependent on false report that people could write a false report about somebody, and then that would be like the last day of your life. So facing these challenges as a child was definitely difficult. I think it changed me, that experience, to a different person. When I came out of that prison, I was a different person. I wasn't the same person anymore. I couldn't understand why I was being treated so unfairly. So, I became someone else once I got out of that place, and I realized that I was living in a country that's policed and monitored, and kind of did nothing with my life until 2003, until I opened my front door, my house, and I noticed there was an American soldier standing there.
Was it a good-looking American soldier?
I mean,
big body, body armor.
Yes,
like,
definitely. It was a unique experience to actually, to see an American soldier for the first time in your life. It was, very rare because you're never seeing soldiers that so dressed differently, looking differently. Perhaps people in our neighborhood thought, this might be a hoax by Saddam Hussein, but you couldn't really get it wrong because, when I opened that front door and I saw that American soldier, this was probably the whitest American I ever seen in my life. I was like,
straight albino.
Yes,
Powder was at your door,
and you couldn't really say this was a member of Saddam's regime because that guy was really lighter skinned, somebody you never seen before, and it was a weird feeling, because as an Iraqi, the first thing you really think about is that is Saddam's really gone, because this was such a really difficult thing for us to observe, that is Saddam's really going to go away. There was no way any of us thought that Saddam will ever be removed. Probably people thought Saddam would be in power for whatever years that he could live, but it was a shocking moment for many Iraqis. I think that it was a huge 180-degree change that Iraqis went through, and definitely it shocked everybody. I think I was the happiest man in the world because things changed for me. You went from being so oppressed to being more free, to having an opportunity to do whatever you want to do with your life.
So like that, I'm glad you said that right there. That last sentiment, you went from oppression to freedom, and all of a sudden, like, there's an unknown realm of possibility. Like I was talking to one of my kids the other day, and I was like, "Hey, I'm not saying you have to figure out what you need to do with the rest of your life right now, but like if we could narrow it down to like an area, so we could start moving in that direction, and like, and then realizing the possibilities are endless, and you know." We've always kind of had that, so we take it for granted. We've always kind of experienced that. We've always kind of known that. And any kind of infringement upon that is so offensive. But the idea, the mentality, like for me to like even just try to relate to not knowing that and then experiencing actual freedom, like that must that I don't know how, like if there's any way you could put that to words, we would love to like hear that.
I think you wouldn't know what a freedom is like unless you don't have it. I think that most Americans came from a country that already have freedom, where you go to a different human being that has never seen what a freedom is like. Like for us, this was the first time we ever tasted honey in our life. This is the first time that we ever got to experience that we had a freedom, and now what's next? But however, we were shocked within a couple months that because we thought Iraq things were over, that once Saddam got taken down, that all the evil was gone. But that wasn't the case. Couple months later, we had members of Al Qaeda who were trying to come back with the Ba'ath Party members to take over the country. So the changes that we went through in those first couple months that the American troops were in Iraq were humongous. And all of a sudden, you noticed that there were huge changes going. You started seeing more of the extremists that you never seen in your life, more of the Al Qaeda, the Islamic radicals, and you were put on a choice whether you were going to stay at your home, live that life that they decide or design for you, whether you were going to do something with your life. And for me, the fastest exit was joining the Iraqi military. I was home and I was listening to the radio, and there was uh, an advertisement that they let their old Iraqi military go and they were establishing a new Iraqi military. And at that time, that only the hopeless would make such a step or join the Iraqi military, because people, first of all, had enough with the Iraqi military because it was mandatory during Saddam time. Second thing, people were nervous about joining the Iraqi military and started fighting against every single resistant group in the country. So this was not the choice of anybody that wanted to have a life. But I made that choice because this was the first time that you were going to fight for a constitution that you never had. This was the first time you were going to have rights that you never had. And it's the first time in your life that you're able to carry a gun and have an equal fight with your enemy.
That's man, you said a lot there, and I want to unpack a little bit there. I want to go back and give our listeners and viewers a little bit of context. When you talked about, so I'm rewinding us a little bit for someone that's just joining us late. When you talked about the time you ran into that police officer and he wanted your money and wanted to just rob you essentially, and you wouldn't give it to him, and he wrote something up or did something to get you in jail. How old were you at that time?
I was 12 years old.
12 years old, thrown into prison, yep. And then how long were you in prison?
About 4 weeks.
Okay, but still, 4 weeks as a 12-year-old, and not in a kid's prison.
4 weeks, not at Club Fed.
No,
it's definitely not an American prison where you have a bathroom and a room and a food. It was devastating a place. It was actually inside of the Iraqi Ministry of Interior, and it was a warehouse where they kept everybody inside of it.
Yeah, where you were essentially probably fighting for your own life in there, and as a 12-year-old, the odds were stacked against you. So you talked about you came out of there as a totally different person, even in 4 weeks, and I could totally understand that. But then you talked about, the next monumental thing was when the day you opened the door and there was an American soldier there. Did you know what was leading up to that point? Did you know that Iraq, that America had come back to Iraq and was fighting Iraqi soldiers? Was there anything on the news? Were you hearing Baghdad Bob talk, or was that literally like, what is this guy doing here? I had no idea that anything was even happening.
I was actually watching the news during that time. I was because Saddam propaganda had all this fake news around talking about everything. However, I was outside. I lived near the Bayab, which is where a lot of the fighting was. I was just a few miles away from that, and you heard the fighting. You heard the you saw all the jets flying around Baghdad. You can tell based on the Iraqi soldiers back then who were falling apart that Saddam was gone, and the soldiers or the old Iraqi military did not have the motivation to fight. Everybody was forced to fight. Saddam would execute people who would run away from the front line. People just were waiting for the right opportunity to get away and just go home and be over, and this would be over. So for me, I didn't think the Americans would definitely take over Baghdad because, we went through 1991. We went through so many scenarios where the American troops came into Iraq and then pulled all of a sudden. But it was definitely shocking for us to see that the Americans were actually right in your neighborhood and your nightmare was over.
Just curious, we see, we know Toby and I both haven't served in combat ourselves, and kind of know when you're in the heat of combat and adrenaline's pumping and all that, things happen. We also, a lot of people see stuff on the news, but with your interactions with Americans from that point on to whenever you decided to join the Iraqi military and all that, were especially those first few months, because like you talked about, it was a roller coaster, right? They're here, Saddam's gone. Okay, he's not here. There's a vacuum now. Who's all these other bad dudes coming in town? Were your interactions around or with Americans positive at that time?
Absolutely.
Okay, or I didn't know if there were any American people are a-holes everywhere. I didn't know if they
not at all. I think it was really shocking for me for the first time in my life to talk to someone with a gun who was a human that was able to communicate with me like another human being, because we're not used to that. We're used to looking people who are mean, dictatorship soldiers who are going to beat you or kill you. And all of a sudden you're talking to somebody, asking the questions, and you're getting answers back. So my biggest concern, or the first thing I ever asked him, was if they were ever going to pull out of Iraq.
Were they going to leave like they did before?
Were they going to leave like they did in 1991? Because they leave, Saddam comes back, you're a traitor, and you're being shot right in front of your home. So he assured me that they were not leaving. This is over, and Saddam's gone. And when he said that, that was definitely an assurance that, this is over. But my interaction was really positive with them. They were not threatening. They were not pointing the guns at anybody. They were actually very more, you could say they were communicating properly with the people. And I think the first questions they asked if we were happy. And I think a lot of people were getting that, security a little by little. And then all of a sudden you had people outside waving at them, welcoming them. And it was a really, really great experience.
No, man, I love hearing that because, coming back and forth between Iraq and America, especially during that time, and especially, I had the opportunity to work with the fledgling and the starting of the Iraqi forces. It is so nice to hear validation to the efforts of the professionalism of the coalition soldiers and how they were not what was portrayed by many in the media. So let's talk about. I love the fact that you heard it on the radio. And the reason why I'm giggling about that is because we were trying to recruit guys to join. At the time it was the JSCS, and then became the ICDC, and then it became the ING, and then it became the Iraqi Army. Yep. So I was involved in the process from the JSCS to the ICDC, and then I helped stand up the cohort units in northern Iraq for what became the ING. Yep. And you can't see it, and I'm not going to turn the computer, but I actually have the very first guide on from the very first ING, the 160th Infantry ING. I have the very first guide on here in my office. But we had no idea how to recruit. We had no idea how to reach out and find people that were passionate about the country, passionate about their future, passionate enough about their families to join us, because we understood by doing so it was a horrible opportunity. In fact, the 8th of May 2004, I remember we had just got our first cohort unit of ICDC together. We recorded of course, we used a soccer stadium because figured like that was the easiest place to do it because we could get the most people. Unfortunately, we were too stupid to realize that was the same soccer stadium that Kusei had, executed people in, and like just our naivety, our cultural misunderstanding. We like, hey, come on down to a place that was used for executions to join the news forces. But
I just want to clarify that when I joined the Iraqi military, I did not. I was not part of what's called the ING, the ICDC back then. We actually joined the first division of the Iraqi military, who was trained in Karkush, northern of Iraq.
Yeah.
We were actually perhaps trained by an American company called MPRI, which is mostly retired Vietnam veterans. So the difference is that the ING and the ICDC were locals who were recruited in their own cities as a civil defense corps to defend their own cities.
Right.
During that time, we were picked up from 3 different recruiting centers, one in the north in Erbil, one in Baghdad, and one in south of Iraq in Basra. So in the first Iraqi battalion that got established, in each platoon, there was about 30 to 35 soldiers. And from each platoon, there have to be Iraqis from all over Iraq, which means in every platoon you had a Kurd, you had a Yazidi, you had a Sunni and a Shia, and you had some who were Christians as well. And you have some who were Shevak. So the establishment of the first Iraqi division, which was the Iraqi military at the time, was totally different than the Iraqi ING. Perhaps we actually the ING went through about probably a month of a training, where we went actually through a 3-month proper basic training. And then after basic training, we were sent to our whatever specialty we're going to be, whether MP or infantry or whatever specialty. So we actually went through the proper training with these Vietnam veterans, and it was very interesting experience because these guys were definitely not people who were in uniform. They're retired.
Salty. They were salty.
And when I went in the bus and we went all the way down near the Iranian borders, some of us had no idea about what a training camp is like or Vietnam veterans are like. And some of us were wondering, we're like, hey, you know what? They're old. They're probably not going to be as active. So probably training is going to be easy. And we get there, and as soon as the bus stops, we had them they were wearing a blue uniforms, and they got on the bus, started screaming at us. And these Vietnam veterans were in better shape than most of our 18-year-old guys that were just joining the military. And I'll tell you, like, they hammered us the moment we didn't even get out of the bus, and we were getting yelled at. And I still remember like 6-7 of them yelling at everyone's face, and the Iraqis didn't know what they were saying. And I spoke a little bit of English at the time, and I heard the word push-ups. And when I heard the word push-ups, I just jumped in. I'm like, hey guys, everybody need to do push-ups, and that's what they're asking you to do. And it was a very interesting experience. It was just a funny moment that you had a bunch of Vietnam veterans yelling at a bunch of Iraqis who doesn't understand them.
Hey, so you got the quintessential first day experience that any guy or gal that's raised their hand and joined the U.S. forces gets. The old shark attack.
Yep.
Yep.
And you got it from some salty dogs.
Probably.
I love
who were cussing and speaking in English that pretty much nobody except maybe you and a few others even understood what they were saying, and they were giving
MPRI has done an amazing job. Perhaps MPRI trained only the first division of the Iraqi military. It is the only division in the Iraqi military that has not been demolished or defeated since 2003. It's actually being used as the QRF, the Quick Reaction Force for the Iraqi military. So it's the only division that does not have a sector or an area they're responsible. They just threw them as they need them in any fight they want. So they participated in the Anbar province campaign on Ramadi and Fallujah. They participated in liberating Mosul with the Iraqi Special Forces. To this day, the unit has its own system that these Vietnam veterans have established into that unit, the way that unit was trained properly, perhaps everything they did um, during those days of the training camp, it was something that the Iraqi military has never done, and they produced the best soldiers Iraq ever had, and truly, we're thankful to this day for their training and for everything they taught that division.
No, like the brilliance of the blending, the melting pot, and putting everyone together. That is crucial. Like we tried doing that with the ICDC because being north there in Mosul, we had a lot of Kurdish soldiers, and we had a lot of Sunnis. We had Yazidis of it, like that were also there. We tried blending them with limited success. And so like knowing like the intent was to put everyone into the fight together. Everyone experiences the same thing together. Everyone is equal. There's no privilege. I guess that's maybe the appropriate term. There's a cultural privilege, there's a racial privilege. Everyone's equal. Everyone's in it together, and that's like super exciting to go back and reflect upon, because like that was the brilliance to the success of that unit, and the continued success of that unit. Like here, we look at the map of Iraq geographically and realize the country's not that big. Right. Yeah. So we think that, like, I live in the Republic of Texas. It's a moderately large state. And, we just assume that everyone in Texas is a Texan and believes the same, feels the same, acts the same. And
well, like they do, except in Austin, but that's a whole different
with one exception. For the most part, it is fairly consistent. But the reality is geographically, while that country's not large, demographically and culturally, it couldn't be more diverse. The difference, between the Kurds in the north and Kurdistan, Erbil, Dahuk, the places that you spoke of, in comparison to like Tikrit, deep Sunni, to like getting down to a battle that I hope we get to talk about here in a little bit. Haifa Street. Like the Shia there, the uprising that happened under the Shia influence of, so it's like it couldn't be more diverse. And to put all those pieces together, and pieces that have like deep rooted animosity towards each other.
It was like, honestly, it was a first time ever in Iraq history for individuals from those areas to be among others from the opposite side of the country. I mean, I was born and raised in Baghdad. I was actually never seen a Yazidi in my life. I didn't even know they exist until my platoon established, and then I had about 10 to 15 Yazidis in my platoon. I had Kurds. I had Kurds who were from the Iranian Kurdish borders who have never even been to Erbil. Some of these guys lived in the mountains their whole entire life. They only speak one language, is Kurdish, and they don't speak anything else. So it was interesting that we were 30 men that most of us spoke different languages, have different ethnicities. Kurds are not Arab. Yazidis have their own Shebak, whatever, areas they came from. And it was interesting that for all of us to go through this experience together. I'll tell you that the torture was real by these Vietnam veterans, that these Iraqis for a fact have never done that much PT in their life. And when you saw that, PT was twice a day, that training. You did it early in the morning before breakfast, and you did it after all your training was over in the evening. And truly, it was the first time in Iraqi military history where the Iraqi soldier ate properly. At the time, MPRI have brought a 5-star restaurant from Baghdad to provide the food for the 1st Iraqi division. About 90% of the soldiers who were in that unit was never able to afford um, eat meat or get a protein in a meal, and all of a sudden they went from never able to eat meat maybe once a month to eating meat in every meal, doing PT twice a day. It actually changed the shape and the body of the Iraqi soldier and how it looked. When they first joined, they looked like a bunch of skinnies because all they ate is carb. They ate rice, they ate bread, and all of a sudden you were eating from a first-class restaurant. You're eating meat in every meal. You're fed really well. You're doing PT. And it's really like, when I was sitting in the DFAC back then, and I would look at some of the soldiers, they would look at me and says, you know what, I was never able to afford this meal in a restaurant. Now I'm eating it every single day as an Iraqi soldier. It was such a magical moment to see that, and we were getting paid as a salary 150,000 Iraqi dinar, which was equal to $75 a month.
Which is probably a ton of money to have.
It wasn't really a ton of money as 150,000 Iraqi dinar back then, but we jumped up to $1 million once the Anbar province campaign started.
Oh, they jumped it up, yeah. But
we were so happy. I think some of our soldiers have never seen $1 million Iraqi dinar in their life. Most of us have never seen that kind of money, and it was truly like an excitement that you're being treated well, you're being paid well, and you're just about to come out of that base to fight the people that oppress you your whole entire life. It was just, everybody was excited to fight.
Yeah. Hey, I want to keep moving on because there's a lot of stuff to your story. We've definitely been on the start of it, but you how long were you in the Iraqi military?
So I served from 2003 and till about 2008.
Okay, it's 5 years, and you went from what rank to what rank during that time?
So I went from a corporal to a sergeant to being a platoon sergeant, and that was my promotion in the beginning when I first joined. In 2004, I received a battle for promotion to a command sergeant major in the Iraqi military.
And if I heard right, you set the record as the youngest sergeant major in the Iraqi military.
Yep, I was the youngest to receive that battlefield promotion. I was only 18 going to 19. Perhaps I was the first Iraqi soldier to be certified as a counterterrorism, as an anti-terrorism level 2. And I went to Germany for training as well. So at the time, it wasn't many soldiers on the ground as the Iraqi military now. I mean, you're talking about the Iraqi military started with 150 soldiers. Now you're talking about 500,000 soldiers in Iraq that's defending Iraq at its all borders. So it was definitely a very small start, but when you lost soldiers and when you had casualties, it was really hard to fill them up. And when you were the elite that joined the Iraqi military in the beginning, you were getting that battlefield promotion faster than anything.
Okay, so I mean, it was partially because you joined early, you survived many of fights, and I'm sure you had to have showed leadership and camaraderie and spirit and that kind of stuff, right? I mean, you obviously spoke a little bit of English. That may or may not have helped, but
Haifa Street was my first. Before the Anbar province campaign, Haifa Street was my first really difficult battles because when we went to the Anbar province, we got deployed as a brigade going in there. But Haifa Street was definitely when I moved back to Baghdad. I got stationed in what's called Al Muthanna Airfield Base, which is the base that's right outside at Haifa Street and that patrols Haifa Street on the daily basis. We had an ING unit, which is an Iraqi Civil Defense Corps unit that patrolled Haifa Street on the daily basis. Our job was to protect the recruiting center that was there to recruit more Iraqi soldiers than to expand the Iraqi military. So one day I got called by my commander to pick up dead bodies of a new Iraqi recruits who happened to fill an application, and they were taken hostage in Haifa Street and executed and thrown right under the bridge in the end of Haifa Street. And when we went there, we didn't realize it was an ambush that was set up by a famous terrorist named Sayyid Hitcham, who led actually the whole entire insurgency in Haifa Street. We went there with about 29 of our soldiers. We went to pick up the dead bodies so we can put them in our pickup trucks and to drive them to the morgue, to the Iraqi hospitals where their families can pick them up. Longest story short, it ended up becoming a firefight for about an hour and 45 minutes. They had to place IDs right behind us so they can make sure our QRF will never make it to us. And they were hoping that we would fight until I run out of our ammo, and then they will eventually capture us. They were hoping that day to capture the ICDC soldiers who were patrolling the area regularly. They did not expect that mission would be assigned to the Iraqi military unit who was there. Thank God most of us knew the rules of ceasefire. We knew how to control our ammo and to conserve ourselves until we can do it. Other than that, we would not have kept 1 hour and 45 minutes going toe-to-toe with them. Unfortunately, we lost many of our soldiers in the first 5 minutes of that fight who were as a gunners in those pickup trucks. I mean, you could imagine that we were Iraqi soldiers who were equipped with very basic weapons. We had AK-47s, RPK, and a PKC, which is equal to an M249. While our enemy had RPGs, had grenades, had everything and more firepower than we did. So defending ourselves, it was definitely difficult. So we lost a lot of our soldiers in the beginning. But I lost my platoon commander at the time, who was a young lieutenant, who was from Mosul. And he was captured alive after he ran out of his ammo. They ended up beheading him there. And
what was his name?
His name was Lieutenant Ahmed. He was from Mosul.
I have an affinity for anyone that came out of Mosul. Hey, we got a great question that came out of our one of our chat rooms from Lieutenant Colonel Gooding, and a fine tomahawk himself. He's like commenting on your English and its proficiency, and he wants to know where did you learn to speak English, and was it your interaction working with Americans that honed it so you could say cool things like toe to toe? You're like, got it, my man. Like,
yeah, I mean, when I was stationed near Hyper Street, I was literally working almost about 18 to 20 hours a day. The base was getting attacked on the daily basis during the night and during the day as well. So we were like working right side by side with the 1st American Cavalry Unit. And you sat there with Americans for most of your days looking at them. And you did tower duty, you did checkpoint duty, you patrolled with them. So most of my conversations were with American soldiers through the whole day. And even though my English was very basic at the time, but I was with them through the whole entire time. I got to meet a lot of people from Texas. I got to.
That's where you learned the best English.
I bet he learned a lot of bad English there too with American soldiers.
That was the start. That was the beginning, is learning all the bad words. And I still remember the first thing they ever made me say was called bull beaver.
That was it.
Yeah, and I didn't know what it means, and I just would. They would make me say every little curse word, but it was amazing. But what I did personally is I to answer the question to the Lieutenant Colonel, that I grabbed a notebook and I started writing every single word I would learn, and kept that notebook with me until I was shot in Iraq in 2008.
So go ahead, Toby.
Which leads us in, like, so you like. Not only did you receive like one of the most impressive battlefield promotions, you also like had your blood shed for the cause. Like you were a hard charger. You were not someone there that was a casual participant in this. You were like deeply committed. Not only did you go around, you talked about going to the Ambar, which was not your neighborhood, but you were deeply entrenched in Baghdad, in Haifa Street, at the height of all that went. So you mentioned a famous terrorist.
Yep.
Why don't you tell the listening audience what happened to that guy?
Saeed Hashim was later actually detained by the U.S. military, but not that year. He got detained almost 3 years later. Saeed Hashim was a former a Republican Guard officer that was trained in Russia, and he was the engineer or the architect of all the Haifa Street ambushes and the fighting that was happened there. He was somebody that as a professional soldier knew what he was doing, and truly made our life difficult. And we lost a lot of Americans, a lot of Iraqi soldiers as well, due to this guy style of fighting. Because the area, the street of Haifa Street, it was such a very unique place that is set right next to what's called the Old Baghdad. It had a lot of tunnels. It's very high buildings where they have so much sight over you. So it was such a place where set right next to the river, the Tigris River. You were, if you would enter that place, you are entering their zone, and you only have one way in, one way out, and it wasn't easy. It was very difficult, and they held that ground for a while.
No, like you talk about the units that you stood next to. We got guys in the chat room that spent time in that area, and man, I love seeing these comments. Holly's a freaking Muldoon. Respect. Like, all these cool comments. Like,
well, and we got guys that shed blood.
From guys that were there.
Yeah,
guys that
sweat and blood on that same street.
What you're talking about, that's awesome.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so tell us.
Go ahead. No, I was just say. So I mean, you got shot in 2008, and that's kind of when you got out of the military. But I want to get you've the name of the book, your Twitter handle's Terrorist Whisperer. The name of the book's Terrorist Whisperer. Now, was that a nickname that was given to you? And if so, how did that come about?
That was later on, because after I got promoted, I was transferred to the Iraqi Ministry of Defense, which is stands for the Iraqi MOD, which is who later on I got recruited by the U.S. intelligence during that year in 2005, and I became an officially intelligent asset for the U.S. intelligence. I got transferred to the Iraqi MOD based on a request by the American Special Forces, since I was the only highest NCO that spoke English. And the U.S. mission at the time was to place about 50 American advisors from the Green Zone who would build the infrastructure of the Iraqi Ministry of Defense and the Iraqi military in general. So they felt that they needed someone who would handle the security and the front checkpoint of the Iraqi MOD, which sits right next to checkpoint 1 of the American Green Zone, which was a very, very hot spot at the time. So this mission was definitely a very difficult, sensitive mission. When I went there, it was difficult in a way where I was protecting the checkpoint from the outside on the daily basis, with dealing with car bombs, mortars, rounds, casualties in the daily basis, and also I was trying to handle the security of American advisors who were inside of the Iraqi MOD, while you have 4,000 Iraqi employees that will enter the building every single day. So this was a very difficult mission, and once I walked through the building, I realized that there was a lot of bad faces that was already inside of the building, because at the time, members of Al-Qaeda, Islamic State, or the Mahdi militia, and all these resistance groups realized that the Americans did not have a magical glasses as they thought they had. Most of them started forming political parties and started holding positions inside of the Iraqi government, whether inside of the Iraqi MOD itself. So it was a very difficult mission to protect an American who was already working with bad guys in the same building. But you're trying to handle the security in the outside, and you have another concern in the inside. So when I got recruited officially by the U.S. intelligence, my job was to identify terrorists and agenda of these terrorist groups who were trying to fail the U.S. mission in Iraq, trying to hurt American soldiers. And this was definitely an intelligent game that was going on between the American intelligence and the resistance groups like Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State at the time.
Yeah, so you were essentially a counterintelligence and like you said, asset that was working, trying to identify those threats. And obviously, I mean, there's pictures of you with General Dempsey, with General Petraeus, and receiving a lot of awards and things like that.
Yeah,
you must have had. I mean, you must have helped stop some significant attacks or capture some really key players, or stop some of those to get those kind of accolades and rewards. I mean, and you also had to keep yourself alive and not get found out. I mean, that had to be pretty tough. And also, it was, some know, maybe some don't. You're also probably at the same time worrying about your own family to make sure somebody can't tie you back to some of them. How was it dealing with that?
What made it interesting is that there was never a U.S. intelligence asset who happened to be a command sergeant major in the Iraqi military. Usually, intelligence assets are usually people who are civilians among what's called the red zone. They could be compromised any minute, or they could be shot or killed at any second. And what really made it unique is that the terrorists you were battling inside of the Iraqi MOD were not just an A-level terrorist. This was the highest leadership and the highest operative these terrorist organizations ever had, whether Battle Corps, which was an Iranian proxy supported by the Iranian government and the Iranian intelligence, whether it's the Mahdi militia, whether it's Al-Qaeda or Islamic State. This was more of a battles of the intelligence between the U.S. and all these organizations over power, over information, over every decision that the U.S. government would make in Iraq. And what made it unique is that I was untouchable, that I didn't leave the red zone. I didn't leave as a civilian to go home and see my family, so they would never be able to track me or kill me or assassinate me like they do to everybody else. I was someone in uniform who was protected by so many soldiers. I had about 2,000 soldiers that were deployed outside of the Iraqi MOD. The unit was big enough, and I had about a small team that controlled the security inside of the building. So I had so much around me that they couldn't really touch me like they could to any Iraqi citizen in Iraq. So this what made it unique. This what made me more effective for the U.S. intelligence, and this what kept me alive that long, because I was probably the only intelligence asset that operated in front of them while they knew I worked for the U.S. intelligence. For about a year between 2007 and 2008, I operated right in front of their face, and they knew that I worked as a U.S. intelligence asset, but they couldn't do much because I don't leave outside of the wire as an Iraqi citizen. So many Iraqis left the wire, and they were assassinated minutes after. But for me, I just knew that this was the weakness they were looking for, that if I have left to go see a family member or got weak for a day, I would get killed immediately. So I learned the game as I grew old in that building. And I learned that as long as I discipline myself, I will never give him an opportunity. And as long as I'm there, I'll be able to cause him more damage. And during those years, we were able to foil a kidnapping attack for an American officer from the building. We were able to stop a suicide build who was about to blow up on 15 Americans that was on duty inside of the Iraqi Ministry of Defense. So watching them on a daily basis, it was definitely not an easy mission. You were watching people who were highly skilled, and I became better and better over the years in learning how to utilize the threat, how to distinguish the top 10 operatives in the building who would be more dangerous to the Americans, because the building was very sensitive. It's a building where you had General Dempsey or General Casey walking through it on the daily basis. You had General Petraeus. You had foreign ministers of defense, like the Australians and the British ministers of defense, coming through the building. So I learned to really figure out my sources and utilize my security guards properly. Perhaps anytime we had a foreign visitor or someone that was coming into the building, we will only use one hallway to get them in and out of the building. We would not let them through the crowd. We would learn exactly how to shut down all the doors to ensure their security. Perhaps in 2005, we had Mike Pence, who is now the vice president in the MOD, visiting in Iraq. So Congress members, higher officials, State Department officials were there the whole time. So, my job was extremely difficult to learn how to shut these doors and to learn the individuals that we have to keep an eye on while these visitors were in there. But the game was much more bigger than just attacking Americans, just killing Americans. You were collecting on them as much as they were collecting in you. And this wasn't just regular information. You were collecting on high-level individuals, and I try my best to remain there as much as possible.
No, you're absolutely right. Like the strategic level of the operational intelligence that y'all were engaged in was Absolutely unparalleled. And I really, like, I think this is a good spot to kind of break here because we're really excited about the movie. And
Yeah.
we really want everyone to go out, buy the book, watch the movie, because like this is how like we actually tell the truth of what happened on the ground. Hollywood has tried to do it with like crazy movies like The Green Zone, The Hurt Locker, and they think
Yeah.
that this is a reflection of what actually went down,
Yeah.
and that's not. It's so it's so disingenuous. So Hamidi, if you could tell everybody, we've already shared the links to your book. We've shared the links to the movie. Can you tell us when they can get the book now? Uh, can you tell us when or how we can watch the movie?
So we're working on the film. The film will probably be released about the end of the month. It will be released in multiple platforms. We're still
Okay.
uh, negotiating to figure out what platforms we're gonna put it on. Um, the film is kind of different. It is the first military intelligence operation to be released to the public. It kind of shows you what was going on behind the scene and the battle that we were facing because every military story out there, it's always about a bad day or a bad hour that you went through. But there was nothing in there that was about 5 years of a struggle dealing with this enemy and how much that enemy had developed itself over the years because they became more of immune to us, even as Americans. Um, so the film it kind of really shows the difficulty that we were facing in all level. Even General Petraeus, who's in the film as well, talks about the difficulties that he was facing as a U.S. commander in Iraq. Everybody was fighting his own battle, trying to stop these individuals from winning Iraq or winning the Iraqi people. So the film um, definitely covers a lot that has never been covered before. In future, very amazing individuals. Perhaps we have Colonel Burke, who is a full Burke Colonel military intelligence officer who was working inside of the MOD. During that time, we have Lieutenant Colonel Jason Failer, who was counterterrorism, working inside as an agent inside of the building as well, above me. It's very amazing individuals we all are proud to have. And the film will definitely be released, and we will have an announcement about when it will be released in the end of the month. Um, and we'll be honored to share it with the public.
So if everyone goes to it's the terroristwhisperer.com, that's where you can find out all the information about the movie. You can watch the trailer. We've shared it in all the chats, and it's on the website. That's also where you can purchase the book. And super one of the reasons why we were so excited to have Hamadi on is because, like he just kind of alluded to, this is a groundbreaking, unprecedented look at intelligence operations in one of the most, I don't want to use the word controversial, but in one of the asymmetrical warfare, one of the biggest change that we've seen strategically, militaristically, in American history, and in fact is part of humanity. This is really an insider's on the ground, ground level view at something that you just don't get. And so we're super excited to be able to like talk to you about it and share it and promote it. And Hamadi, thank you, first and foremost, for your efforts for your people.
My pleasure.
If 10 more of you stood up, if just 10 more of you stood up, we'd have got to this point a lot quicker. So, like, I just want to make sure it's known, like, while many did, like, at your level and what you accomplished, like, it is so impactful. It changed the landscape of humanity. It's bettered your country. It's bettered our country. I'm deeply grateful. As I said earlier, my involvement with the Northern Iraqi forces, one of the greatest pride moments of my life is participating in seeing people do it for themselves. And not only did that, you did it at the highest level. You're a stud, as Colonel Gutting just said in the one of the chat rooms. You're a freaking Muldoon. I love it. And thank you for coming on. Thank you for just being so authentic and sharing with us everything. Hopefully you're willing to come back, and I'm glad that you're currently buried in work here in the United States of America, also known as the land of freedom, because you deserve it. You've earned it.
Thank you.
And we are grateful and proud that you are within the borders of this country, because that's the spirit and that's the people that we want mentoring or influencing us, because we need to appreciate and we need to understand what we have much better.
Appreciate that. It's an honor being with you guys.
Yeah, absolutely. And like Toby said, especially when the movie comes out, or right when it's about to come out, we definitely want to get you back on and talk about that, and discuss a little bit more what people can expect to see and help promote that. And you're always like Toby said, you're always welcome back, man. We didn't even get into all the other fun stuff. We talk about politics, your perspective, your opinions on things. We want to hear all that, and I think our listeners do too, because we hear it on ours, right? We hear it on our TVs and the talking heads. But for someone that's went through what you've went through, who is now benefiting from the sweet things that this country provides, and freedoms and liberties. You talked about having meat for the first time. You talked about getting paid for the first time, and some of the things you had to go through. But now what you see here, I think some of that, even though you can't describe what it's like to taste freedom, I think by giving some of that and describing what you see today, for those that haven't traveled overseas, whether to a combat zone or not, don't realize how good we have it. I think you provide some fresh, realistic perspective. So, and
I want to clarify that, for the American people and for you as well, is that, I think we're so far from Iraq that Americans are not aware of what goes, just as you mentioned before, that Hollywood has made so many movies about Iraq and portrayed Iraq from the Hollywood version kind of side of it. However, there are many Iraqis. I'm not the only one that stand up and did magnificent things out there. Perhaps we have an Iraqi officer who was an intelligent officer, actually, who embedded among ISIS and was able to get as many information as possible for the liberation of Mosul in the last couple years, and he ended up getting compromised and ended up getting killed and executed by ISIS. We have so many people out there in Iraq that are not being recognized by the U.S. media, and that's unfortunate, because the media only reports the negative about Iraq. It only reports the terrorists or the bad people opinion. It never puts the light on us, that the ones who are trying to give a positive message about America. It never put the light on the people that wants to support America, or the people that are actually pro-American. So,
well, you see that's with everything, right? They always want to report the bad news, right? The commercials and TV sells when it's bad news. Unfortunately, it's not just limited to that. But you're right. Bad Iraq sells. A good Iraq and people benefiting it doesn't support any narrative of if they have an agenda. But yeah, well, I mean, that's what we'd love to have you back on too. Tell some of those stories. If you know some people to put us in contact with that are around and reachable, we'd love to hear that. But even those stories that you talked about that you probably know of firsthand, even that have never been told, we would love to just have those, repeated here and just share that. Let some of our listeners and viewers hear those things that other brave Iraqis have done to stand up for their own freedom and for their own country. That, like you said,
Indeed.
will never be heard. But hey,
Indeed.
So much, Hamidi. Thank you for giving us some of your Tuesday
My pleasure.
night. We appreciate you coming on with us, and thank you everyone for joining us and being part of this. I think this is a pretty remarkable historic night. We've had some past interpreters from Afghanistan and other places, but I don't think we've ever had a soldier from a foreign military that has worked alongside ours. From Afghanistan or Iraq. I don't think we've ever had.
Yeah.
So I think you're the first.
Interpreters are most amazing individuals out there. Truly, they are individuals who served this country, who went above and beyond for this country. Proud of a lot of interpreters are friends of mine. They're the only veterans that are not having a veteran status, in my opinion, in this country.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. Awesome. We've talked about that on this very show, and
we
agree with you on that.
Yeah. Well, hey man, thank you so much for joining us again. Please stay in touch with us, and thanks to our good buddy, unpaid producer Rob, who found you, and because if it wasn't run for him, we'd never run into you. But yeah, stay in contact. Thank you everyone else for bringing us into your houses tonight, and hope everybody has a good night.
All right, guys. Well, it was really nice meeting you guys. Appreciate you guys having me.
On Twitter. Thank you again, and have a good night.